Imagine this: 70% of workplace conflicts are caused by ego clashes, according to a study by the CPP Inc. Isn't that a stunning statistic? The ego, we come to realize, is a mighty force that molds our interactions and relationships, frequently in ways we might not fully comprehend or even recognize. So let's delve deeper into this omnipresent element of our psyche, the ego. What is it really? To put it succinctly, the ego is our self-awareness. It's the part of us that paints our image of ourselves. It separates us from the rest of the world, delineates our individuality, and carves out our uniqueness. It's our self-portrait, the representation of our self-worth and our personal identity. Think of your ego as an ever-present narrator. It's telling your life story, playing the lead in the grand theater of your existence. But here's the twist: the ego, due to its innate nature, is fundamentally self-centered. It's always focused on its own needs and wants, always trying to assert its dominance, and always striving to protect and enhance its self-image. It can't help but put itself first. When we feel slighted, the ego prompts us to take offense. When we feel threat, it's the ego that raises the defensive shield. It's the ego that stirs up conflict when it perceives an attack on its identity, keeps us on edge, and fuels our fierce reactions. But the influence of the ego extends far beyond just self-preservation. There's another side to this coin, and that's the role of the ego in comparison and competition. The ego is a relentless critic, always measuring itself against others, comparing, analyzing, and judging. It seeks validation, thrives on competition, and is always striving to prove its worth. Our egos make us bask in superiority when we outperform others. But on the flip side, they also make us feel inferior, small, and inadequate when we fall short. The ego fuels our desire for power, status, and recognition. It pushes us to chase after these external symbols of success, to validate its self-worth, and to boost its self-image. However, it's important to note that the ego is not inherently bad or evil. It plays a crucial role in shaping our self-identity and self-esteem. It fuels our ambition, gives us the confidence to assert ourselves, and empowers us to chase our dreams. It's a vital part of our psychological makeup, a key player in our mental and emotional well-being, and a driving force in our pursuit of personal growth and development. But like most things in life, the ego requires balance. If it goes unchecked, if it's allowed to grow unchecked, it can spiral out of control. This can lead to interpersonal conflicts, misunderstandings, and a toxic. It can create barriers between us and others, hindering communication and collaboration. Unchecked, the ego can create a sense of alienation, a feeling of us versus them. It can make us see others as competitors rather than collaborators, turning workplaces into battlegrounds instead of places of mutual cooperation and shared success. The unchecked ego can blind us to the perspectives of others, make us deaf to their needs and concerns, and make us insensitive to their feelings and emotions. In essence, the unchecked ego can create a toxic environment. But thankfully, there are ways to manage and even dismantle it. By learning to recognize the signs of an unchecked ego, by cultivating empathy and understanding, by encouraging open and honest communication, we can start to keep our egos in check. By learning to see others as equals rather than competitors, by celebrating diversity and encouraging collaboration, we can start to create a more positive, inclusive, and cooperative environment. So let's remember, the ego is a part of us, but it doesn't have to control us. We can choose to manage it, to it in check, and to use it to our advantage, rather than let it dictate our actions and reactions. The ego left unchecked can create a toxic environment, but there are ways to manage and even dismantle it. Now, consider the case of Jane, a high-performing executive whose ego clashed with her colleagues. Jane was a force to be reckoned with in the corporate world. She was an exceptional performer, consistently outdoing her peers and setting new records. But her ego, her inflated sense of self-worth, began to overshadow her capabilities and accomplishments. Jane was a staunch believer in her ideas, her strategies, her vision. She felt she was always right, and that her way was the only way. This belief began to create friction with her team. Colleagues felt unheard, unappreciated. They started to dread team meetings, knowing Jane would dominate the discussion, leaving no room for alternative perspectives. Her ego also made her defensive. She saw criticism or disagreement not as an opportunity for growth, but as a personal attack. This resulted in her isolating herself, creating a barrier between her and her team. The work environment became tense, productivity dipped, and team morale hit rock bottom. But what if Jane had approached things differently? Instead of leading with her ego, she could have led with empathy, understanding, and respect for her colleagues' viewpoints. She could have fostered an environment of open communication where everyone felt heard and valued. She could have seen criticism as constructive, a chance to improve and learn. She could have used her position to uplift her team, to nurture their skills and talents rather than suppressing them beneath her ego. This approach would have not only improved her professional relationships but also enhanced her performance and the overall work environment. Jane's story serves as a stark reminder of how unchecked egos can wreak havoc. The power of ego can be destructive, but it can be tamed, controlled, and used to build rather than break. And that's a lesson worth remembering. So how do we dismantle an ego? Let's explore some powerful techniques. First, we have mindfulness. By observing our thoughts and emotions without judgment, we can separate ourselves from our ego. This allows us to see our ego as an external entity, not an integral part of who we are. It's like taking a step back and watching a movie of our internal dialogue. We become the observer, not the participant, in our thoughts. This perspective shift is crucial in dismantling the ego. Next, we have self-reflection. This involves asking ourselves probing questions to uncover our true motivations. Why did I react that way? What am I trying to protect? Whose approval am I seeking? These questions can help us expose the ego's influence on our actions and thoughts. Thirdly, we have acceptance. This means acknowledging our flaws and weaknesses without shame or guilt. Acceptance doesn't mean complacency, but understanding that we are works in progress. It's about being okay with not being perfect. This acceptance can deflate the ego's need to always be right or superior. Fourthly, we have empathy. By putting ourselves in other people's shoes, we can move beyond our ego. When we empathize, we understand that everyone's perspective is valid, not just ours. This can help us let go of any need to dominate or control conversations or relationships. Lastly, we have gratitude. By appreciating what we have, we can shift our focus from what we lack or desire. This counters the ego's tendency to always want more or to compare ourselves with others. Gratitude helps us realize that we already have enough, and this can greatly reduce the ego's grip on us. These techniques aren't easy. They require consistent effort and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves. But the reward is immense. Freedom from the constraints of the ego. We become more authentic, more compassionate, and more at peace with ourselves and others. Remember, these techniques require patience and practice, but the results can be transformative. You now have the tools to effectively manage and dismantle ego. We've delved into the power of ego, seen it in action through a real-life case study, and discovered techniques to break it down piece by piece. Remember, understanding ego is the first step, but application is the key. It's not enough to just know about it. You need to actively apply these techniques in your life. Unchecked ego can lead to conflict and miscommunication. But by managing it, you open doors to improved relationships, better communication, and a healthier work environment. Don't let ego be a hurdle in your path to personal growth. Use these tools, practice these techniques, and witness the positive changes unfold. And don't just keep these insights to yourself. Share this video with others who might benefit from these insights. Together we can create a world where ego doesn't stand in the way of growth and harmony.